I'm going to just start reading in verse number 1. We'll read down through quite a bit of this chapter. It says, "After these things, when the wrath of King Ahasuerus was appeased, he remembered Vashti and what she had done and what was decreed against her. Then said the king's servants that ministered unto him, Let there be a fair young virgin sought for the king, and let the king appoint officers in all the provinces of his kingdom, that they may gather together all the fair young virgins unto Shushan the palace, to the house of women, unto the custody of Hegai, the king's chamberlain, keeper of the women. And let their things for purification be given them, and let their maiden, which pleaseth the king, be queen instead of Vashti. And the thing pleased the king, and he did so. Now in Shushan the palace there was a certain Jew whose name was Mordecai, the son of Jair, the son of Shimei, the son of Kish, a Benjamite, who had been carried away from Jerusalem with the captivity which had been carried away with Jeconiah, king of Judah, who Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, had carried away. And he brought up Hadassah, that is Esther, his uncle's daughter, for she had neither father nor mother, and the maid was fair and beautiful, whom Mordecai, when her father and mother were dead, took for his own daughter. And it came to pass, when the king's commandment and his decree was heard, and when many maidens were gathered together unto Shushan the palace, to the custody of Hegai, that Esther was brought also unto the king's house to the custody of Hegai, the keeper of the women. And the maiden pleased him, and she obtained kindness of him. And he speedily gave her things for purification, which such things as belonged to her, and 7 maidens which were meet to be given her out of the king's house. And he preferred her and her maidens unto the best place of the house of the women. Esther had not showed her people, nor her kindred, for Mordecai had charged her that she should not show it. And Mordecai walked every day before the court of the women's house to know how Esther did, and what should become of her. Now, when every maid's turn was come to go into the king Ahasuerus, after that she had been 12 months, according to the manner of the women, for so were the days of her purification accomplished, to wit, 6 months with oils of myrrh, and 6 months with sweet odors, and with other things for the purifying of the women. Then thus came every maiden unto the king. Whatsoever she desired was given to her to go with her out of the house of the women unto the king's house. In the evening she went in, and on the morrow she returned unto the second house of the women, to the custody of Shaashgaz, the king's chamberlain, which kept the concubines. She came in unto the king no more, except the king delighted in her, and that she were called by name. Now, when the turn of Esther, the daughter of Abihail, the uncle of Mordecai, who had taken her for his daughter, was come to go in unto the king, she required nothing but what Hegai, the king's chamberlain, the keeper of the women, appointed. And Esther obtained favor in the sight of all them that looked upon her. So Esther was taken unto King Ahasuerus into his house royal in the 10th month, which is the month Tebeth, in the 7th year of his reign. And the king loved Esther above all the women, and she obtained grace and favor in his sight more than all the virgins, so that he set the royal crown upon her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. You know, sometimes we look around and we doubt God's presence in our lives. Sometimes we look at the things that are going on, and there are times where we would look and say, man, it just seems like God's not here. It seems like God's not doing anything, that God's not working. But just as a director in a play sits behind the scenes, and you would not see them up and around and moving, but they're the ones that are controlling everything behind the curtain, the same way God works in our lives. We don't see him physically on a day-to-day basis, but he is constantly working behind the curtain. So today we're going to talk about the unseen director. The unseen director. Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, I want to thank you so much for the opportunity you've given us to study your word today. Lord, I pray that you'd help us to bring you glory and honor in all that we do. Lord, please use your word to draw us closer to you, that we might know you more every day. We'll thank you for what you've done and what you're going to do. We'll pray it in your Son's precious name. Amen. If you've ever attended a play, there's several things that you may notice about that play. You may look and see the actors that are coming on and off stage. I always laugh when you're like, exit stage right or enter stage left. And you just see people back and forth and the props that will take place. Excuse me. I remember the first time I saw a situation where they had different scenes set up on kind of a round table, and they would pull the curtain, and the whole stage would shift to the next setup. And I'm like, wow, this is a pretty elaborate thing. You'll notice the music that takes place, and you'll see all of these different things. But the one thing that you will not see until really the end of the play is the director. The director is behind scenes, behind the curtain. They're the ones that are telling people, all right, you need to come on stage, or you need to go off stage, or get this changed, or if somebody messes something up, then the director is going to be the one to be correcting the things that are taking place. And in the book of Esther is not all that different from a play or a drama. If any of you were blessed with the opportunity to go down to, I believe it was Branson, they had Sight and Sound did a play on Esther. Now, I'm not sure what the time frames were on this. We did not get a chance to go down to it, but I know some people that went down several times to go see Esther, and they said it was just awesome. Well, it kind of made me think of that. The book of Esther is not all that different. There are main characters. There are I'm not going to say there's musical numbers, but maybe, I don't know if Esther had her, almost going to be queen musical number behind closed doors and nobody knew about it, who knows. But there are things that relate very similar to it. And you would look at some of the main characters. That's kind of what we're going to do today. We're going to take a look at some of the characters that were involved, and you would see it almost is kind of a feel-good story when you look at it. Like, there's some sad things that take place, but it's almost one of those, it's like, man, somebody should have made a movie out of this, or somebody should have made a play out of this, because, there's this orphan girl who was taken in by her family, and then eventually she has the opportunity to go and meet the king, and she ends up becoming queen of this mighty nation, and it's like, it almost feels like one of those, like, feel-good, like, Hallmark movies. Like, I can't help but after I had that thought and I read back through it, I'm like, man, somebody could really ruin this book if they made it into a movie. But it kind of has that feel-good thing to it. I wanted to point you to this. Look at the quote that's on the first page of your study guide. F.B. Meyer said this: "Fit yourself for God's service. Be faithful. He will presently appoint thee in some unlikely quarter, in a shepherd's hut, or in an artisan's cottage. God has prepared an appointed instrument." God has his prepared and appointed instrument. As yet the shaft is hidden in his quiver, in the shadow of his hand, but at the precise moment at which it will tell with the greatest effect, it will be produced and launched in the air. We might look at things and I kind of tongue-in-cheek say that whole, it was an orphan girl and she ended up being the queen, but it's like, we would look at that and be like, whoever would have guessed that some orphan girl that was of a captive people that had been brought into this nation would ever have the opportunity to be queen of that nation? People would look at that and like, absolutely not. That would never take place. Well, as we're going through this, I kind of want you to have this thought today. Although Esther is the name of the book, Esther is the title character in the book, it's really a book that's written about God, the one who is behind the curtain the whole time, the one who is orchestrating everything that is taking place, and he just works providentially through everything. So the first thing we're going to look at today is a defeated king, a defeated king. Verse number 1 of Esther chapter 2 says this: "After these things, when the wrath of the king Ahasuerus was appeared, he remembered Vashti, and that she had done, and what she had done, and what was decreed against her." There's some interesting things that have taken place between chapter 1 and chapter 2. The big thing that has taken place is King Ahasuerus goes, has this huge party, has everybody come in, and he's really showing off everything, and then he goes out to war. For a few years, he's out at war, and this particular time he decided, we're going to go fight against the Greek nation, the Grecian nation. And so they're going out and they're fighting against the Grecians, and, when he returned to Shushan the palace, it wasn't a victorious situation. It wasn't a, like I think of David coming back into Jerusalem and like excited and victorious and like things are good. And that's not how this guy returned to the kingdom. He didn't return with a glorious, triumphant parade. He returned with whatever soldiers he had left and entered back into his kingdom and his palace in humility. He had been defeated by this other nation. And so they had suffered a difficult defeat. If you remember, Ahasuerus thought he was the most powerful man, right? Especially when we looked at the party that he threw. He spared no expense. He went through and he made sure that it's like everybody, like just the one thing that always gets me is like everybody had their own goblet, but each goblet was different. I'm like, that's a huge flex, I think, of the fact that he's a wealthy person. Everybody gets their own individual cup that doesn't look like anybody else's cup. And then the, technical part of my brain is like, how did somebody make that many cups that are not the same? Anyways, but that was kind of his flex was, he spent a lot of money on this deal. Well, as he's coming back, I can't help but feel like this dude was knocked down a few notches. Like he thought he was the cream of the crop. He thought he was the most powerful guy in the world. He had the largest kingdom to the date, and he had gone out and gotten defeated. Now, this is a map of kind of the area that he was at, and so you can kind of see in purple there, that's what was the Persian Empire, and these couple of cities that sit over here, Athens and Salamis. Well, his Grecian campaign began with a battle at the Battle of Thermopylae. And it was kind of he went out and just destroyed everybody at this battle. It was something that was kind of put some wind in their sails. They're going like, man, we're going to really defeat these guys this time. We're really going to give it to them. It's going to be great. They built all kinds of momentum as they went in. They burned Athens to the ground. They went into this battle in Athens and just absolutely destroyed Athens. Well, they faced a problem. They went down to Salamis, and the Straits of Salamis, the Grecian navy was sitting there and just embarrassed Ahasuerus in just an utter defeat. I think I don't know for sure, but it feels like it's one of those where like Ahasuerus made it out with some of his army. Like it was just such an embarrassing, devastating blow to him that by the time he comes back to the kingdom, it's like, I'm apparently not as big of a man as I thought I was. I'm apparently not as powerful as I thought I was. And I'm just thinking about these things as he's sitting there, and it feels like he's full of regret. He's full of like, man, I can't believe these things happen. And remember, several years have passed since that point of like big, huge party that he threw and had all these people come in and everything. And now he's just sitting there in a humiliating defeat back in his kingdom. Like, what am I going to do now? And I can't help but think that many times when we get to the point of sorrow, when we get to the point of like struggling with things, that we think back to a happier time. We think back to other times, and he starts to get to this point of thinking of Vashti. He's like, oh man, maybe she wasn't as bad of a queen as I made her out to be. Maybe I said some harsh things that I shouldn't have said. And so kind of just, sitting there struggling. But he had dealt so harshly with her, so mean, if I could put it that way. But if you recall, the thing was, he had made a decree against her. Anything that was done within law, within Persia, could not be taken out of law. If you remember the story of Daniel in the lion's den, he had made a decree that nobody was allowed to pray to anybody else, and Daniel wanted to pray to God. So obviously Daniel prayed, and he got caught for praying, and I'm sorry, you've got to go down to the lion's den because it's in law. It can't be unwritten even by the guy that wrote it. And so sitting in their position, oh man, I miss Vashti. Maybe I shouldn't have said the things there's nothing he could do about it. Because he had written into law, like, she's not king anymore. She will never come into the king again. Or she's not queen anymore. You never come see the king again. And like, he was pretty harsh about the things that he had done. Well, somebody gets this great idea. And I can't help but think, the night that all of that took place with Vashti, he had some advisors that had kind of advised him, oh, you should just you should just show Vashti that she's not allowed to do that. You should say things to Vashti that, is going to make every woman ever make sure that they're always going to respect their husbands and they never pipe up and say anything mean and like you got to make a point. And I can't help but think this is probably the same group of guys that is talking to him now. It's like, oh, king, don't be sad. Just, you know what? I've got a plan. So they devised a plan. And as I think about these counselors that are trying to help him out, I just feel like there's some arrogant guy that comes in and is just like, it'd be a really good idea, king, since you have such a large province of a big area of control that you have, you should just send guys throughout the land just to find the prettiest girls everywhere. Just go through the whole country, go through the whole nation, and just go find the prettiest virgins that are everywhere. Go find all of them and bring them in, and then just pick one. Like, that sounds like a great idea. I'm sorry, I think about this guy, and I'm like, this guy is an idiot. Whoever this guy is that is just projecting this idea to the king, he's like, I'm trying to make him feel better. I don't want him to feel as sad, and so I'm going to give him this idea, and we're going to go through and come up with this great plan. It's going to be wonderful. Proverbs 16:4 says this, the Lord hath made all things for himself, yea, even the wicked for the day of evil. We look at this plan, and I'm like, this is dumb. This is like a terrible plan, a disrespectful plan, a mean plan. How is this ever? God can use things even if evil men are the ones that have put the things in motion. God uses all of this to, again, take this orphan girl and put her in the position of queen to take care of his people, to help his people. God uses all of it, but think about God doing this in other occasions. Okay, we recently talked about Pharaoh. God used Pharaoh to bring his people out of Egypt. Pharaoh fought the whole thing. Pharaoh was difficult through the whole thing, but in the end, Pharaoh let the people go, and they sent out gold with all the people as they went, and God used him to take care of his people. Well, what's to say that God couldn't use this situation to bring about the end that he would have to be brought about? And so they decide, we're going to send people into every one of these provinces, and we're going to find some ladies. We're going to bring them back. We're going to put them in this year-long spa treatment is just really the way that I can look at it. It says 6 months with this oil, and then 6 months with this scent, and it's like, ladies, it's like a 6-month spa treatment. Like, you're just going to get pampered and taken care of for 6 months, and then you're going to go to this other place, and then you're going to get pampered and you get taken care of for another 6 months. And part of it sounds good. I think the ladies was like, that'd be great. That'd be wonderful. That part sounds good. But the whole purpose in going through all of that is that the king would bring in all of these young virgins from all over the place to take them for a test drive and decide which one he likes best. I mean, it's an absolute atrocity, an absolute slap in the face to what marriage is supposed to be. And this is the plan that they devised. This is the plan that they brought up. You're going to bring in these ladies. They're going to go through this year-long process, and then one at a time, we're just going to bring them into the king, and the king is going to decide which one he likes best. I mean, it's just absolutely sad situation. I can't help but think it mentions nowhere where in the line Esther was. How many gals had gone into this king before that? How many people had he put through this process before Esther was in line? Because all I can think about is these ladies that have been brought in that it's like they've been stolen from the land that they lived in. There was no say that anybody had about it. If they came in and they're like, that is a beautiful young lady, and we're going to just take her with us. You don't get to say anything about it. She's gone. She got snatched away from her family, and she's going to be taken to the palace. Well, then she goes through this whole process, and the king goes on his test drive, and well, then it gets to a point where what's going to happen now? Well, now she gets sent to this other place. Notice there was a different person in charge of the second house that they got sent to. It's like, okay, you're now the king's property for the rest of your life. You're no longer pure. You can never get married to another man. You are the king's property for the rest of your life. This was really a sad, disgusting process that God allowed to be used for his plan. God allowed it to be used to bring Esther And so our next point is a promoted orphan, a promoted orphan. Again, I just cannot help but think of this sad situation that it's amazing how people will go through hardships and make worse decisions during those hardships. The defeated king comes back and he's feeling sad and he's feeling lonely, and somebody gives him this idea, you should do this. Oh, yeah, that'd be a great idea. It's not like that's a worse idea than any of the ideas I've already had before, and so you're just adding fuel to the fire, and well, it's time to introduce one of our cast members. Mordecai in the palace. Look at verses 5 and 6. God's word says, now in Shushan the palace there was a certain Jew whose name was Mordecai, the son of Jair, the son of Shimei, the son of Kish, a Benjamite, who had been carried away from Jerusalem with the captivity which had been carried away with Jeconiah of Judah, whom Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, had carried away. So here we get a little bit of history of who Mordecai is. He was involved in the carrying away of some of the people when Nebuchadnezzar had come through. He was a foreigner. He was somebody who had come to live in this new country. He was somewhere around 70 years old. And you know how he gets introduced? A certain Jew named Mordecai. Now, you could look at that in a bad light, but I think it was a compliment. A certain Jew. It wasn't just some guy. It was this certain guy. God had brought him in from this foreign land and puts him in a position of leadership. I think of the story of Daniel and Shadrach and Meshach and Abednego, and they had been brought in and they had been put in positions of leadership when they had been brought in. Well, the same thing happened to Mordecai. Mordecai sat in the king's gate. He was part of the team of, it's not just a bunch of guys sitting there like at Walmart greeting people as they come into the store. It's not the Shushan Greeters ministry. It is his council of people that sat there and helped make decisions. Mordecai is there sitting in the gate in this position of leadership. And so it's almost as if we're taking a shift here real quick and looking at this story of Mordecai now after going through some of the same things with Ahasuerus. Next, though, we get into Esther, okay? She was adopted after her parents had died. No, it said Mordecai's uncle had died. And so I think Esther and Mordecai kind of would have been some sort of cousin, I think. But he takes her in as his own daughter, raises her as his own daughter. Look at verse number 7. It says, and he brought up Hadassah, that is Esther, his uncle's daughter, for she had neither father nor mother, and the maid was fair and beautiful, whom Mordecai, when her father and mother were dead, took for his own daughter. When Esther was an orphan, when nobody was there for her, Mordecai stepped in and took care of her. And I think that could really be a cool picture of Christ. Christ stepped in when I was nothing. I couldn't do anything to take care of myself. I was incapable. And Christ came in and loved me. You know, and that's what Mordecai did. He stepped in to help take care of Esther. Look at Romans chapter 8. I think it's on our second page. Romans chapter 8, verses 15 and 16. I thought it was on the second page. My eyes aren't working this morning, apparently. Oh, my goodness. Third page. All right, I'll figure it out eventually. For ye have not received the spirit of bondage again to fear, but ye have received the spirit of adoption, whereby we cry, Abba, Father. The Spirit itself beareth witness with our spirit that we are the children of God. Now, I look at this, and I'm like, Mordecai had no idea who Esther was going to be. Right? Mordecai didn't have the ability to just look and say, man, I'm going to take her in because she's going to be somebody someday. I laughed a little bit because all I could think of is the Blind Side movie where the gal brings in the guy who's potentially going to be an NFL athlete someday, and people got mad at her because they're like, oh, you're just bringing him in because he's going to be famous someday. Well, Mordecai had no idea. It's like she was family. She was an orphan. He brought her in and was like, I'm going to take care of you because you're family. I'm going to take care of you because somebody needs to take care of you. He wasn't trying to get some benefit out of it. He wasn't trying to get something down the road where he's going to get a pat on the back, or he's going to, bring himself to some point of power. Well, it's going to happen. It happens in the story. God takes care of him and promotes him within the kingdom. But Mordecai had no idea that was going to happen. He just said, this is somebody here, and I need to take care of her. And so we look at Esther, and it's kind of this obscure orphan girl and this guy who just happens to serve in the king's gate. And you could look at the story, and if it ended there, it would just be like, all right, well, there's this people. There's probably a lot of people in Persia that was their story. They just happened to be there. But God, the director behind the curtain, was working on all of these things to use both of those people. You don't know how God's planning to use you in the future. You don't know how God's planning to use, I don't know how God's planning to use somebody in the church. I don't know how God's planning to use maybe somebody that I know, that God has a plan for them that's huge. It's a big plan. I don't know those things. God's the one that's behind the curtain working all of these things out. And so I just look at Mordecai, and I'm like, all he was doing was being faithful. All he was doing was being loving and caring. He was taking care of somebody that needed taken care of. And he had no idea where it was going to lead. Now, the next point is Esther brought to the palace. Esther brought to the palace. Look at verse number 8. It says, so it came to pass when the king's commandment and the decree was heard, and when many maidens were gathered together unto Shushan the palace to the custody of Hegai, that Esther was brought also unto the king's house to the custody of Hegai, keeper of the women. Now, I don't think Mordecai was thrilled about this. As you can probably imagine, I don't think Mordecai was thrilled that somebody came in that had more power than he was able to do anything against, and they said, we're taking her. You have nothing you can do about it, nothing you can say about it. I'm sorry, I just can't help but think about it. Ryan, I'm sure you'd be very upset if somebody just came in and took Haley. Just like, you don't get to say anything about it. It would be a sad deal, right? It would be very, very sad. And so I'm just really trying to put us into the story and think about the things that are taking place. This happened all over the nation. They were just taking people from all over the nation. There's a historian named Josephus, and in some of the studies that he had done, he had estimated there were somewhere around 400 ladies that were taken from all of these different provinces just to be brought in so the king could decide which one he liked best. I mean, just a sad, sad situation. And yet, we have to remind ourselves, God had a plan. When we see things taking place in life where we would just like, man, it's so sad, these things that are happening. It's so frustrating, these things that are happening. God has a plan. He is the one that's directing everything behind the curtains. God's plan, allow Esther to be brought in and immediately allow her to be the one that's favored the most. Look at verse 9. It says, and the maiden pleased him, and she obtained kindness of him, and he speedily gave her the things of purification, with such things as belonged to her, and 7 maidens, which were meet to be given her out of the king's house. And he preferred her and her maidens unto the best place of the house of the women. I don't know where exactly Esther was living at before this, but she's now been brought into the palace, and you know what? God had put her in a position to, I don't know if she was just, a really sweet, a really humble gal, and just this guy's like, you know what? I think maybe she's got the potential to be the queen, and she's just been very kind, and you know what? We're going to put her up in the best spot. We're going to put her in the nicest spot in the palace. And again, God's working at these things behind the scenes. He's orchestrating all of these different things. And as you go through, you can see the hand of God moving through everything, even if it's a terrible situation. Esther got brought in. She had not done anything that was like, man, she would be the absolute best one. But God said, this is going to be the one. And it just moves behind the scenes. And I just think it's a cool thing to think about and to look at, especially as I look at things like maybe modern day, and I think about ministries. There's like this missionary went to this country, and he just so happened to meet this one guy that was instrumental in the fact that they were able to create this huge mission work and everything, or somebody went to a town to plant a church and they just happened to meet this person. It's like God is moving behind the background and giving good favor to some people that I think about when I went in and talked to the school board about the fact that it was like, could we use the space at the high school? I don't know any of them. I'm not from here. I'm literally this outside stranger coming in like, I'm just curious if you'd let us into the school every single Sunday for a year and let us use the space. And they were like, yeah, that's cool. God was orchestrating things behind the curtains. It's the exact same thing that he was doing here. All right, now our next point is a prominent Jew. A prominent Jew. So Esther has now gone through the point where she has gone through her whole process. She has spent her year. She's gone into the king. The king said, you know what, you're the one, and places the crown on her head. And at this point, the story shifts away. And it kind of seems odd that it would take this shift, but it shifts away to Mordecai. And we look at a lot more of his life within this time frame. And so a prominent Jew. And then this brings us to a plot to assassinate the king. A plot to assassinate the king. We actually didn't read this part yet, and so if you look down at verse 21 and 22, it says, in those days, while Mordecai sat in the king's gate, two of the king's chamberlains, Bigthan and Teresh, of those which kept the door, were wroth, and sought to lay hands on King Ahasuerus. And the thing was known to Mordecai, who told it unto Esther the queen. And Esther certified the king thereof in Mordecai's name. And so Mordecai's serving in the king's gate, and he happens to hear things. This all falls back into that thing of God is working behind the scenes, because you would look at it and be like, this guy just happened to be in this place where he happened to overhear this death threat situation taking place, and he happened to be able to tell somebody who was in the king's palace that she would be able to then happen to tell the king of everything's going on. There's no irony in it. There's no it just happened to happen that way. It's God moving through all of it as he directs the different things that are going on. He had placed Mordecai in that position, which I guess sometimes you might think about him like, Mordecai had probably been in this position for a long time. He'd probably been serving in this capacity for a long time, and maybe he had thought to himself, man, what am I doing here? Where is my life going? What is my purpose to be served here? And start asking all those questions that sometimes we sit there and ask, like, wow, why am I still doing this same thing that I've been doing forever? Well, God had a plan for him. God had him in that place because one day these two knuckleheads were going to walk through, and they were going to be upset at the king, and they were going to say, you know what? We should do harm to the king. You know what? I don't know if it was like we should beat up the king, or if this was like a full-on death threat, like we should kill the king. It was like, it just happened that Mordecai was there to overhear all of this. These guys were intending harm to the king, and so he said, I've got to tell Esther, because Esther can get this information to the king, because I don't want anything to happen to him. And so he sends a warning. Now, verses 22 and 23, I guess we read 22 already. So verse 23, it says, and when inquisition was made of the matter, it was found out. Therefore, they were both hanged on a tree, and it was written in the book of the Chronicles before the king. So the evidence had been given. They had talked to whoever they needed to talk to, found these two guys that were trying to do harm to the king, and it was all done. It was all taken care of. And all I can help but think back on is the fact that, did Mordecai have to say anything? I mean, think about it. This big, huge event that the king had done where they'd taken maybe 400 ladies across 127 different provinces, decided, I'm just going to decide which one I like. And I kind of, told you the test drive idea. I'm like, Mordecai could have been pretty upset about all of this. He didn't have to tell anybody that this death threat had taken place. He could have just been an upset father whose daughter had been taken for whatever need the king wanted and said, you know what? Forget you, king. I'm just going to hold this information to myself and see if maybe these guys off you. He didn't have to tell anybody. But didn't he display a lot of character in doing so? There's a lot of times in life that I think There's things that we might look at and say, well, I don't have to do this. But in doing so, you show a lot of character. In doing so, you probably reflect pretty well on your Savior. In doing so, other people may see Christ through you. And I don't know if they looked at it and they're like, wow, Mordecai, you didn't have to tell anybody. I really appreciate that you did, because we were able to not have the king get murdered, but you didn't have to tell anybody. And so he showed a lot of character in doing those. You know, a lot of times people want to be in that position where they're like, I'm hurting. I don't like where I'm at. I'm frustrated. And that's also one of those things that leads into other poor decisions being made. Romans 13:10, which I think is on the back page. Romans 13:10 says, love worketh no ill to his neighbor. Therefore, love is the fulfilling of the law. And then right below it, Romans 12:19 says, dearly beloved, avenge not yourselves, but rather give place unto wrath. For it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, saith the Lord. He showed a lot of character in the fact that he said, I guess I'm just going to let God take care of this. And I can't help but think, again, these are people who have been taken from their country and brought into another country. They already were kind of in a position where you might say, like, they had reason to be upset. They had reason to be annoyed or frustrated. And yet we see these few individuals throughout some of these Old Testament stories that were like, I know we're not in our country anymore, but God's not any different than he used to be. A God that changes not. He's still worth serving. He's still worth following. And he demonstrates great character here. And I just think it's very interesting to see how he reacts to all of this when he could have been just upset. He could have just not said anything. He could have just waited it out and just seen what happened. Now, the other interesting thing that takes place is you don't see an immediate reward take place in his life. You don't see him immediately, good job. Give that guy a pat on the back, like he did a great thing. Thank you so much, because I'm not dead. And he didn't get this immediate pat on the back. It was something that waited. It was something that took time. And I think so many times people are expecting good things to happen because they did something good. People are hoping that because I said the right thing, or maybe you'd put it this way. I handed out a tract to somebody, and I was just waiting for God to say, good job, I'm so proud of you, good job. We expect things sometimes, right? Where we're like, well, shouldn't I get a pat on the back for this? Shouldn't I get a promotion for this? Shouldn't I? I think it's more important to do the right thing because you're doing the right thing, right? I don't see anywhere in here where Mordecai was expecting something to happen. Because he didn't even go to any of the channels that you would say, well, I need to report to my boss or whatever, and then his boss will tell his boss, and he just happened to hey, Esther, I heard some things that they're going to try and kill the king. And I thought you should know. Remember, she's queen at this point, and so it's technically her husband. He's like, well, I just want you to know somebody's going to try and kill the king. He didn't go through a position of trying to get rewarded for it. And I think that God greatly blessed him for that. God did reward him for doing the right thing, which can be confusing sometimes when we look at things and say that we expect to have something done for us because we did the right thing. Again, do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. We go through, where did it go? We go through life sometimes and look at things and they don't make sense, right? If I look at every situation that's taking place here and look at everything that took place with Esther, and we're like, yeah, well, she happens to now be in the position of queen. Well, yeah, I look at Mordecai, and he happens to be in a position where he's in a position of leadership. And God, what are you doing? What is taking place? Why are you allowing things to unfold the way that they're unfolding? You have the blessing that you can read from Esther chapter 1 all the way to the end of the book. You know exactly what happens. They didn't know what was happening. They looked at the day-to-day of, God, what are you doing? Why have you allowed me to be in this position? Why have you brought me to this point of I have no idea what's going on. I don't know what tomorrow is going to look like. Isaiah 55, 8 and 9 says, for my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, saith the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. God is always working through the background, even if it doesn't make sense. Even if we look at things and we would want to question them, God, what are you doing? God, what is taking place? Why would you allow this to happen? God has a plan. You need to trust in the plan. You need to rest in the fact that he knows what he's doing. Because I think that's a lot of times the problem. People will look at things and say, God, why would you do this? And they'll use that phrase. But what they're really thinking is, God, do you have any idea what you're doing? Are you sure this is the right choice? They're questioning his ability to know things. Well, if God can work through something like this story of Esther, if he can work through a terrible situation to bring about his will, I don't think there's anything that he can't accomplish. I don't think there's anything that he can't do. There's nothing that he can't bring about his plan in. And so we ought to just trust in him. You might not see the director, but trust in the fact that he's bringing about the play in the order in which he intends it to play out. Let's pray.